A century after the Greeks broke Xerxes at Salamis after proving they could beat all the massed armies of Asia, it comes to this. Their hereditary enemy, the Great King of Persia, sits as the master of Greece. He never wins a great war against them. He never defeats them on the field. He simply waits. The Greeks cannot stop fighting one another, and so the king steps in. He dictates their borders. He decides their peace. Athens and Sparta behave like quarreling children, and Artaxerxes plays the schoolmaster who knocks their heads together and orders them to behave. Out of this humiliation grows a dream that the Greeks might finally unite, turn their swords outward, and march on Persia together. This is the story of that dream and of the man who spent his whole life chasing it. By the late 390s BC, Athens has staged a remarkable recovery. Its navy is back in the light. The great irony is how that revival came about, because it came with Persian gold behind it. Yet the Greek world stays trapped in a cycle of reversals that dismays the Greeks themselves. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, and the rest cannot build a stable order among themselves. Every victory only sets up the next war. The Admiral Conon has rebuilt the long walls of Athens. The city takes up its old imperial ambitions at sea, and almost the moment the fleet is restored, the oldest dream returns. The liberation of the Greek cities of Asia. Most of those cities still lie in the hands of the Persian king. When Athens fell in 404 BC and Sparta paid its war debt to Persia, those cities were surrendered to the king. Many had never been freed. So the Athenians begin to fight the Persians again. This might look like a betrayal. King Artaxerxes had helped their commander Conon rebuild that fleet. But the king had only ever used Conon for his own ends, and Athens as a city feels no debt to him for it. First, the Athenians back a rebellion against Persia on the island of Cyprus. Then they make war to recover both shores of the Hellespont, the Asian side and the European side, for Athens. They even press toward the region where, back in the 460s BC, Cimon had won his great land and sea victory over the Persians at the Eurymedon River. The general who leads them is Thrasybulus, a radical Democrat. He pushes deeper and deeper into Persian territory, and there, trying to extend Athenian power ever further, he is killed in action by local tribes. His death is typical of these years. For roughly 6 years after the great Athenian victory at Cnidus, the sea belongs to no one. Spartan supremacy has collapsed there. It is a chaotic stretch. Athens and Sparta both grasp for the leadership of Greece, and Persia stays resentful of whichever Greek state stands on top. Then the Spartans grow afraid. They see that unless they check Athenian expansion, they will slide back to where they were before their victory at the close of the Peloponnesian War. So they turn to diplomacy and to Persia. A Spartan named Antalcidas, a man with a real talent for dealing with Persians, travels to Asia Minor. He presents himself to a satrap named Tiribazus. This is the same commander last seen on the banks of a river, trying with his army to stop Xenophon and the 10,000 from wading across into the satrapy of Armenia. Tiribazus and Antalcidas draft a document together. King Artaxerxes endorses it, and it grants Persia a startling role. The king will be the arbiter among the Greeks. The whole thing is a Spartan scheme. On the surface, it brings the Persian king in with a big stick to enforce peace and harmony among the Greeks. Its real purpose is narrower and colder. It lets Sparta operate freely, with no fear of an Athenian navy striking back. Then, in the winter of 387 to 386 BC, every Greek city-state receives an invitation. It comes from Artaxerxes himself. Come to a conference at Sardis, the old capital of Lydia. There, in the heart of the king's own domain, the assembled Greeks are handed the document that Antalcidas and Tiribazus have prepared. Its terms are stark. There are 3 terms. First, It seems good to the king that the Greek cities of Asia should belong to him, as of old. That means as they were before the years 480 and 479 BC, before the Athenian navy and the other Greeks liberated them from Xerxes. The king simply takes them back. Second, all the other Greeks are to be autonomous and free. That sounds generous, but it has a sharp edge. It means no more empires, no Spartan Empire, no Athenian Empire. There is one exception, a small concession to Athenian pride. 2 islands, Lemnos and Skyros, are granted to Athens because they serve as stepping stones towards the Hellespont and the grain route that brings Athenian wheat from the Black Sea. Third, and this is the teeth of it, if anyone breaks the peace, the great king will enforce it. He will make war on the violators with ships and with money. The Greeks are not enthusiastic, but they sign. And so in 386 BC, a new order is born for the Greek world, dictated by their hereditary enemy. The Great King of Persia has installed himself through this single document as overlord of the Greeks. Think of what has just happened. It is as though Athens and Sparta were quarreling children who could not stop fighting, until at last the schoolmaster stepped in, knocked their heads together, and ordered them to behave. Artaxerxes has made himself the schoolmaster of Greece. When the delegates return home, many ordinary Greeks are appalled. A century after they defeated Xerxes, after they proved themselves a stronger fighting force than all the massed armies and navies of Asia combined, it has come to this. Without ever winning a great war, without ever defeating them, the king has gained the power to rule and dictate to them, simply because they could not unite. This may seem a small thing today, but it captures exactly what an empire was in the ancient world. The Roman Empire gives us a misleading picture. When we hear the word empire, we picture Rome planting its temples and the marketplaces and the roads everywhere it went. That was the exception. Usually an empire meant something simpler and harder. A conquering people or a dynasty that seized chains of city-states across whole regions. It dictated their foreign policy, it demanded tribute, and little more. There was rarely heavy interference, no systematic effort to remake every conquered place in the conqueror's image. The Persians did not behave the way Rome did. So for the king to dictate the foreign policies of the Greek states was, in the ancient sense, exactly the same as declaring them part of his empire. He was telling them he would keep the peace they could not keep for themselves. This provoked a reaction. The Greeks could now see plainly where their disunity had led them, and the problem seems built into the very system they lived by. The Greek word for a city-state was polis. It is the root of our words politics, political, cosmopolitan, and countless place names. But to a Greek, polis meant far more than an urban area. It meant a city, together with the whole countryside around it. The farms of that countryside fed the people of the city. The city, in turn, defended the countryside, offering safe walls to shelter behind when invasion came. The two were a single living thing. English has no single word for this, which is why we are stuck with the awkward hyphenated term, city-state. To understand what happened to the Greeks, you have to understand what a polis really was. City-state systems appear again and again in history, and they are torn apart by warfare again and again. Look first at Sumer in southern Mesopotamia, in what is now Iraq. Ancient cities like Uruk, and Erech, the cities that appear in the Bible and in the tale of Gilgamesh, warred among themselves constantly, until Sargon of Akkad, the first great emperor and unifier, welded them into one kingdom, under a single dictatorial government. Then look to Maya country in Mexico and lands like Guatemala. There, each ceremonial center supported its own king, its own court, its own army, its astronomers, its grand buildings. And as the deciphered Maya script now reveals, their warfare was perpetual. Then look to Renaissance Italy. Venice, Padua, Pisa, and Florence fought one another without rest and could not unite. until outside conquerors finally imposed unity upon them. Sumer, the Maya, Renaissance Italy. The same story, again and again. The Greeks belong to that same pattern, where warfare seems woven into the very way of life. But here is the other side of the paradox. No system in human history has ever produced more innovation, more competition, more free enterprise and daring than city-states. The very arrangement that carries humanity furthest and fastest also seems to have warfare bred into its bones. So where was stability found? It was found in unified kingdoms. Egypt was never a land of city-states. It was always a single kingdom stretched along the Nile. In Mesopotamia, once the Sumerian city-states had been crushed together, the land of the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, was ruled by single emperors, kings of kings, and it was stable precisely because the individual cities had been suppressed. Rome would later follow the same road. Freedom bred genius, and it bred war. Kingship bred peace at the price of that freedom. Being a city-state civilization was the defining trait of Greek life. It even shaped how the Greeks expanded. They did not build an empire out from a single mother city the way Rome did. Instead, a city like Athens or Megara or Corinth would send out colonists. Those colonists would settle a coast in Spain, in France, in Sicily, in Italy, in North Africa, along the Black Sea or in Asia Minor, and there they would create a brand new, independent city-state of their own. Sometimes that new city even went to war with the mother city that had founded it. This was not colonial empire building. It was the reproduction of new cities on the model of the old. In central Greece, this endless internal warfare was sometimes called the wound of Greece, a wound the Greeks seemed unable to heal. And yet certain things did draw the Greeks together. There were the oracle shrines, places like Delphi and Dodona, the oracle of Zeus high in the mountains of northern Greece. There the Greeks, who worshipped the same gods, gathered to pray, to make offerings, and to display their shared greatness. And there were the great games. The most famous were the Olympic Games, held at Olympia in the southern Peloponnese in honor of Zeus, but there were others, the Pythian Games, honoring Apollo, the Isthmian Games held among the pines at the isthmus in honor of Poseidon, and the games to Zeus at Nemea. These four were the crown games, and the prize was never money. It was a crown of wild leaves. You competed only for their honor. Athens added the Panhellenic Games, open to all comers. Through these shrines and the games, through a common language and a shared love of freedom, the Greeks were culturally one people, even as they stayed politically divided. After the king's peace was handed down in the 380s BC, an Olympic festival was held in 384 BC, and to it came an Athenian orator named Lysias. Technically, Lysias was a resident alien in Athens, not a full citizen, but Athens then was something like a modern land of opportunity. People from cities with weaker economies came there and found room to shine. Lysias had done exactly that. He had made himself the finest orator in Athens, so admired that after one of the wars against Sparta in the 390s BC, the city entrusted him with delivering the public funeral oration for its fallen. Now, in 384 BC, he travels to the Olympics. This was a Panhellenic gathering, the one place you could count on meeting Greeks from across the whole Greek world. And the games were not only track and field and chariot racing. The games were also a place to hear people speak. Herodotus himself had once recited his history at Olympia. And there, at those same games, Lysias delivered an appeal for Panhellenism, urging the Greeks to unite in a war against Persia. The theme was not new to the games. Go back to the extraordinary battle of Cyzicus in 410 BC, where Alcibiades led the Athenian fleet against a Spartan fleet backed by the satrap Pharnabazus. At the very next Olympics, a speaker named Gorgias from Sicily came to make the same plea. At that moment, Sicily was under attack from the west by Carthage, colonies of the Phoenicians, Asiatics trying to seize the western Greek world, just as the Persians in the east pressed on the central Greek world. Gorgias raised the idea. A generation later, Lysias took it up again. Then, in 380 BC, came the great manifesto of Panhellenism, an oration called the Panegyricus, composed by the Athenian Isocrates. The Panhellenic dream would be linked, above all others, to his name. He wrote oration after oration, letter after letter, on this one theme, until it became his lifelong course. He was something of a dreamer. He stayed out of active politics himself, and perhaps the idea of the Greeks truly uniting was, in the end, a pipe dream. Yet he was so eloquent about it that he kept the dream alive for decades. He was 99 years old when he died, and he was still writing about Panhellenic unity, still writing about the common purpose that was meant to secure it, war on Persia. To understand this man and this dream, we have to go back to his beginnings. Isocrates was born in 436 BC into one of the wealthy manufacturing families of Athens. Their fortune came not from ancient land or noble rank, but from hard work. His father owned a factory, and he made the pipes played at Athenian parties. Modern texts often mistranslate these as flutes, but they were much closer to oboes, close cousins of the medieval shawm. Like the chanter of a bagpipe, each pipe carried a double reed. Forced air through it produced an intense, reedy sound you could hear for miles. It was an outdoor instrument played in the theater and aboard warships. Spartan pipers used it to keep soldiers in step as they marched into battle. Isocrates' father ran a workshop, worked by slaves that made these pipes and their reeds. Then the family lost everything. The Peloponnesian War ruined them, as it ruined so many Athenian households, the long conflict with Sparta grinding down family after family. Suddenly, the young Isocrates was thrown into the world with no obvious means of support. But he had an education behind him. He had been a pupil of the philosopher Socrates, as had so many notable Athenians of the later 5th century BC. In one of Plato's dialogues, Socrates is shown speaking of the young Isocrates and predicting that he will make a great mark on the world, whether in oratory or in philosophy. Now, philosophy did not mean to the Greeks quite what it means to us today. The word philosophia simply meant love of wisdom, philia, love, sophia, wisdom, and it could embrace a great many things. Philosophy could embrace the natural sciences that Aristotle would pursue. It could embrace the abstract reasoning about virtue and the right way to live. That was Plato's great concern. Above all, it was about thought, about the life of the intellect. Oratory was different. Oratory put that philosophy to work. It meant deciding the right course of action and then making speeches to guide your fellow citizens toward wise choices. In Athens, the home of oratory was a speaker's platform on a hill called the Pnyx. There, about 3 times a month, 30 or 40,000 citizens, or at least a quorum of them, gathered to debate the issues facing the city. It was an enormous open-air town meeting, and a young man with a gift for a fine speech seemed destined to stand on that platform and shape the fate of Athens. Picture Isocrates on that platform. The Parthenon on the Acropolis rises on one side. On the other lie the sea, the Straits of Salamis, and the great naval base at Piraeus. Before him stands a crowd of fellow citizens ready to cheer, to jeer, or to shout an answer back at once. He should have been one of the men who ruled Athens from that stone, but he could not do it. His voice was weak. He was painfully shy. Any interruptions threw him off his stride. He simply could not manage the rapid give and take that a real political orator needed. So he did something else. He combined his love of philosophy with his genius for composing a speech, and he opened a school where he taught others to speak. Pupils came to him from all over the Greek world. Timotheus, the son of the Admiral Conon, enrolled and revered his teacher, and even introduced Isocrates to Greeks in Cyprus who had helped Conon and Timotheus during their years of exile. Around himself, Isocrates built an academy for oratory and philosophy, and he was not alone in this. Just then, Plato was creating a school for abstract philosophy in the grove of Academe among the olive trees. A generation later, Aristotle would found a school at the Lyceum for those interested in politics, ethics, and natural science. This was the great transformation that made Athens a university town. It became an identity that outlasted the fall of imperial Athens by centuries, and Isocrates, the shy man who could not speak in public, was one of the men who built it. So at the age of 56, Isocrates goes to the Olympic festival of 380 BC, carrying the text of his enormous Panegyricus. He probably hands it out as a pamphlet. He may have had someone else stand on a stone and read it aloud, because it was so long that a full recitation would have taken many hours. His theme is disgrace. The Greeks, under the king's peace, are now letting the Persians dictate to them, and it is time someone offered better ideas. He opens by using the setting itself to make a point, and it is a point still worth hearing in a sports-obsessed age. If you were to double the strength of every athlete on earth, he argues, you would do nothing to improve mankind. But if you double the intellect of a single human being, one person's power to grasp new ideas, you will benefit all of humanity because that insight could be shared. To say that at Olympia, the holy shrine of athletic devotion, took real courage. Then Isocrates makes his concrete proposal. The Greeks must unite around the one thing that unites all people, a common purpose. And the natural common purpose for the Greeks was war on the barbarian, war on the Persian. Tradition itself demanded it. The one time the Greeks had ever truly united in the past was against the Persians, and they must do it again. He gives two reasons. The first is unity itself. The second is wealth. The Greeks were candid about wanting material gain from war, in a way the modern world tends to find distasteful. Rather than have Athenians plunder Spartans and Spartans plunder Thebans, Isocrates urges, the Greeks should join together and strike at the greatest hoard of wealth on earth. In this, Isocrates was simply repeating an argument made long before. Back in 499 BC, Aristogoras of Miletus had come to Greece and tried to persuade first the Spartans and then the Athenians to join a grand war against Persia, a war that would reach all the way to the Persian capital of Susa, more than 1,600 miles from the sea, beyond the Tigris River, and pour the entire treasury of the Persian Empire into the victor's laps. Gold and wealth on that scale were exactly the sort of thing to make a Greek take notice. So the real question was not why. The question was how. And Isocrates had an answer. Athens must lead, but Sparta had to join in. And both of them had to set aside their differences. Isocrates spent much of the Panegyricus reviewing recent Greek history, laying out the records of the various states. Remember, this was an age before you could pull an authoritative history off a library shelf. It was precisely this kind of speech, whether a funeral oration praising the noble dead or a political appeal urging a new cause, that gave ordinary people their history. And like every orator, Isocrates bent the facts to make his point. The reality of the past took on a particular spin in the hands of Athenian speechmakers. One argument stood out above the rest. Isocrates charged the Persians with malakia, softness. His proof was Xenophon and the 10,000, the Greek mercenaries who had marched deep into the Persian Empire and then fought their way back out. Isocrates may well have met Xenophon in person. He certainly could have at Olympia, since Xenophon, though an exile from Athens, lived nearby. The Persian Empire, Isocrates argued, was so weak that despite its millions of subjects, it could not stop 10,000 armed Greeks from marching wherever they pleased through the king's own land. It was a powerful argument. In time, it would prove that Isocrates and the other orators had exaggerated Persian softness. But for the moment, it rang true to his Greek listeners. And yet, whatever intellectual agreement the Panegyricus won for the idea, the Greeks proved utterly incapable of acting on it. They might accept in the abstract that unity made sense, but on the ground, every city went on contending endlessly with its nearest neighbor. The dream was admired. The dream was not obeyed. So 30 years after that famous Olympic appeal, the aged Isocrates, now in his 80s, was still searching for a way to unite Greece. He is a reminder that long and fruitful lifespans are not only a modern gift. And at the very end of his life, in the 350s BC, he believed he had finally found his champion. His eyes turned north. Kingdoms, unlike city-states, could be at peace and could be stable. On the northern edge of the Greek world lay the kingdom of Macedon. Long before, in the winter between the Salamis campaign and the final battles of 479 BC, a king named Alexander of Macedon had come down to Athens. He came to try to bring the Athenians over to the Persian side, for the Macedonians had already submitted to Xerxes. That earlier Alexander was still recognized as a Greek, distant though his kingdom was. The proof was that he had been allowed to compete at the Olympic Games, the surest guarantee of true Hellenic blood, since only Greeks were admitted at Olympia. Now his successor was the new strongman of the Greek scene, and the aged Isocrates sent him a letter, begging him to take up the burden of unifying the Greeks and leading them in a great war into Persia. The name of this king of Macedon was Philip. It is one of history's great coincidences. The very man Isocrates chose was already thinking along exactly those lines. Philip welcomed the letter and began laying his own plans to make himself the hegemon of Greece, and to turn the war on Persia into reality.